This video is going to show how to service a swamp cooler, or some people call them evaporative cooler. You can see it's got a cover sheet on it covering it for the winter, and it's got some debris on it. So the first thing to do is remove the 4 screws holding the cover on and get some of this. You can see the pine needles up on the top of it. Get the pine needles off of it and generally cleaned up, ready to take apart. Notice that I have the cooler unplugged. That's the cord for it, and this is the outlet. And while you're servicing it, you don't want it plugged in for fear it could turn on or you could get hurt, injured. The next step is going to be to take out these 3 screws here, here, and here on each side. So that's a total of 6 screws, because this top needs to come off. Before you do that though, this front panel will lift off. This panel comes off by simply lifting it up, letting it back in. These pads are pretty well used. Okay, now this top panel needs to come off. I have these chains that are a little bit in the way. I've got a little more visible than usual, but it's still not too bad. You just have to lift it up and move this out of the way. There's 2 sections. This is called the wet section here, and then there's the dry section. So we're just taking the top off the wet section. Now that I have that top off, you can see from this angle that there's a metal plate. This is actually where the water comes up and it wets the top of the pad. There are 2 screws, one here, one here, that need to be removed on each side. Now that the screws are out, I can lift up this metal plate. It's attached to a hose, so I can only lay it back like this because the water hose is still attached right there. You may be asking, why do I have to take this whole thing apart? 2 reasons. One is this tube right here has to be cleaned out. Things get built up and it plugs the little holes. You don't see it that well. But this tube, the water comes up and sprays up against this and then trickles down on here. This gets plugged with all kinds of buildup. So what I'm going to do is remove the end of this off of here. This year it's not too bad. I've had years where it's plugged this far with buildup, with calcium buildup, and plugged a third of the length of it. So a little later on, I'm going to flush that out. The second reason is be able to clean out the bottom of the pan. It gets all kinds of calcium and things built up there. To do that, I've got to remove these. This is probably the hardest part of the whole job, to get these out. The older they are, the more they're built up with calcium and the heavier they are. But they've got to be lifted up and taken out. Just set this over here. They look pretty nasty on the front, but as it turns out, they're not that bad. And you can tell from the weight of them. There's a lot of buildup on the front, but they're actually still in pretty good condition. When they get so heavy you can barely lift them, it's time to replace them. Or if you can tell that the air is obstructed going through them. Okay, the next step, this little tray needs to come out of here. And all it does is just lift up like this. That tray comes out, and I've got a little vacuum. What I'm going to do is vacuum all of this dirt. You can see this just builds up all year from the previous year, and it needs to be cleaned out of there. I'm going to get a vacuum that out. Okay, I have the pan cleaned out. You can see it's not perfect. It doesn't have to be perfect. What you're trying to do is just get enough out so that there aren't things that will clog up the pumps. So you can see I've cleaned out these. They're not perfect either, but they've got most of the junk off them. Anything big enough that would plug up the pump. And so you put those are also filter screens. These are the two pumps. One pumps the water for the cooling. The other is a purge pump. I'm going to try to do this with one hand. I'll have to use two hands, but so this is what this is. This one pumps the water to wet the pads. This one every 8 hours comes on and it pumps water out here. I'm going to show you. I'm about ready to fill this. I already have the water on. So I'm going to show you. I put this in here like this, and you see it has a little fitting right here. That's where this goes on. Every 8 hours this purge pump comes on and it empties this pan of water that's full of calcium. I'm going to remove this little block and water begins to flow. You can see I had it blocked off because I didn't want this to get wet. What I found after 34 years of cleaning these things is they're easier to clean dry than wet. I tried flushing them and doing all kinds of things. I found this is the quickest and easiest way. Just take it apart, clean it out. I'm going to let this fill. As soon as it fills enough, I'm going to turn on the pump. What I've done is I've got it unplugged like I showed you. I'm going to go in and just turn on. Okay, I have the side panel removed. You can see this is where the electrical plugs in. This one is the purge pump and the regular water pump. This one's the motor. I'm going to unplug the motor because as soon as there's enough water in the pan, I'm going to run just the pump and I'm going to flush out that tube that I showed you. Okay, this is filling up. You can hear it. You also check your float level while you're doing this. With this float, as soon as it reaches the high enough level, it will cut off the water like that. The water level should be about to the end of this, right to this little notch right here. If it gets much higher, there's a danger of it overflowing constantly. And so the way you adjust it is you just bend this rod. If it's too high, you just bend that rod down like this, and it'll make the float lift it up higher. And that way, you can lower the water level. I'm going to watch mine to see where it ends up and adjust it accordingly. Okay, I turned on the pump and you can see it's pumping water out of here through that tube. What it's doing is flushing all of the junk out of there so that tube is clear. When I plug up the end, you'll be able to see it spraying through all the holes. Okay, I had to bend it a little bit. You can see now it's turned off right at this little notch. And it looks like the float's adjusted just right. Next, I'm going to put in this pan and put the pads back in. Then I'll show you how the water distributions works and see if it's working right. Okay, I have the tray in. I got the first pad in. I just want to show you this. There's a notch in these pads that you can see right here. So you can only put them in one way. There's this curb right here fits in that notch. It sticks over a little bit, but that's how they go in there. And then I'm going to wedge the other one in and be ready to check the water. Okay, I have the pads back in. I put this water tray up on top. What I want to show you is, I haven't put the screws in yet. I want to show you what it looks like under here. Okay, you can see there are 2 rows of holes and they spray up against the top of the pan and then drip down onto the pad. You have to look in and make sure all of those holes are clear and none of them are plugged. If they all look good, then this is one of the major causes of ineffective cooling, is this pad doesn't get wet evenly. And so what happens is you end up with these big dry streaks in here. So you just have hot air coming through part of it if it's not wetting this pad completely evenly. That pad looks pretty nasty, but it actually, if you get in close, you can see right through it. And as long as air can move through it easily, it's okay. And it looks like it's wetting it pretty uniformly. You can also look from the back, and you can see the back is a little dry. It takes a while to moisten, but it also gets more wet as air comes in and pulls it toward the back, because that's how it draws the air in. The water distribution looks fine, so I'm gonna go ahead and put the screws in the top tray. Okay, the top tray is in. Before I put the final cover over it, there's some lubrication you need to do. If you notice the motor, on each end there's that little yellow plug right there. And then there's a little yellow one down in there. They get kind of oily, so you can't, it's a little harder to see. But you get some needle nose pliers, pull those plugs out, and you put a little bit of this oil. This is the same oil I'm going to show you where you oil the pillow blocks for the squirrel cage. So I'm going to put some of this oil into those holes. Okay, I've pulled the little yellow plug out of there, out of the oil hole. Now here's what I'm going to use to put the oil in. They make a special little oil bottle that has this long plastic extension. And so if you watch, I can just put that extension right into the hole. And then all I'm going to do is squeeze until I can see it come bubbling out of there. So as soon as you see it come out, that's enough. Then you're going to do the same thing on this side for that. Now I'll mention here, this is an older motor. The newer ones have sealed bearings, so there aren't any places for oiling. They're maintenance free. So if you can't find these little plugs, it's because your motor doesn't need it. Next, I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to oil, they call these the pillow blocks. You can see there's a little fitting on that one too. You give it a squeeze of oil, and then that's oil. There's another one on the opposite side where the pulley is. And so you oil both of those. That oils the fan, and it completes your lubrication for the cooler. After oiling this side, you can put the belt on. I always take the belt off to relieve tension on it while it sits during the winter. To put the belt back on is really pretty straightforward. All you have to do is put it into the groove and then just turn the belt, and it just snaps on. You can see it has pretty good tension in it. So even when it's tensioned, set to tension well, it'll just turn right on there. With the top cover secure, now I can put this back in place. And this just slides, actually, like this. It slides up, and then it locks. These little things lock behind there in the corner. That's the louvered vent where my cooling comes out. Normally there's a piece of sheet metal in the duct somewhere that you need to remove so that the air can flow. In my case, it's this louvered cover. You can see when it's closed, these louvers close like that. I'm using this screw. You can see you have to reach in, put a screwdriver in this little screw. When you turn it, it opens it back up. And so for summer, you have it open. So now I have it open so that the air can flow. If you look through there, you can see that squirrel cage fan and the inside of the cooler. Okay, now it's safe to plug your cooler in and go in and turn it on, make sure everything's working. Now comes the moment of truth. I'll turn this on to pump and we'll listen to see if we can hear the pump come on. You hear that? Pump is on, it's going. Then we'll turn on the fan. I'm gonna go to low so you can hear me. And we'll feel the air. Oh yeah, that's nice. It's got cold air coming out. Okay, now you can see the cooler is running nicely and the house is nice and cool. Now, without running, you can check to see if your house is adequately ventilated. What you do is you just go to your door and you open it. If you have to pull against a lot of pressure, like I'm having to pull against a lot of pressure to get it open. What that means is I need more ventilation. These coolers are not like air conditioners. Air conditioners, you close doors and windows. With these, you have to leave enough area open to get adequate ventilation. What you do is you open your window about that much, and you do it on the downwind side of the house. Our prevailing wind comes from the other side. You don't want hot wind blowing in your house, but you do need a place where the air can escape. The way a cooler works is it needs a lot of volume of air flowing through your house. It comes in and it has to go out. Just as much has to go out as comes in. So you need a lot of area. I have a number of up ducts, but I still needed a little more ventilation. So I have this window open. Now when I check the door, it opens very easily. I don't feel nearly as much pressure. There's still a little pressure that will keep it closed. That's okay, you just don't want it to be an extreme amount of pressure. I removed the covers from my up ducts. If you look inside, you'll see the lid is lifted up because air is flowing through there into the attic. And the attic has to be ventilated well enough to get the air out because a lot of air has to flow. With the cooler blowing cool air, you can see the temperature is about 73 degrees inside and it's over 90 degrees outside. So it's working pretty well.